Dan's the butt half, Jed told Julio, and Cardoza always laughed at that. He said he didn't really know how old he was, but he thought he might have 16 years. As he put it, "Creo que yo tengo 16 años." Spanish is different from English. They say they have 16 years. They have hunger. They have thirst. Jed spoke Spanish better than Dan did, and he thought that was because he could think better in the language than his younger brother. It was a constant quarrel between them. "What the hell do you want to speak Spanish for, Jed? You ain't no Mexican," Dan would say. "Danny, you always think the Mexicans in Waco are talking about you behind your back. You always call what they say a lot of jabbering. But if you understood their language, you'd know they weren't talking about you." "What are they talking about?" "Girls," Jed would say, "and money." "Because they don't have neither." "That's right, Danny, and neither do we." They would laugh after that, and the argument would be forgotten. Cardoza was an orphan. Colter hadn't wanted to hire him on, but Jed convinced him that they'd wear out horses on such a long drive, from Waco up to Abilene in Kansas, and they needed a remuda, and Julio was the best horse wrangler around those parts. After a few days on the trail, Colter stopped his grumbling about having a boy doing a man's work. He and Julio didn't get along, but as Jed said, "Ain't nobody can get along with Colter. The man's got a mean streak in him 1 mile wide and 2 miles deep," he told Dan. "He may be plumb mean," Dan said, "but he ain't got a sense of humor." Which was true, Jed thought, as he wondered when Colter was going to call a halt. They were at least another day's drive from Abilene, and the prairie was going to be dark as a coal bin once that sun was down, and they all had tired on them like a worn-out overcoat. Jed motioned to Colter, beckoning him to ride over for a talk. Colter turned his horse in a tight circle and gambled back to the rear of the herd. He was a lean whip of a man, with a sharp, chiseled face, pale blue eyes that were as vacant as the inside of a seashell, and with that same hollow look to them. They were eyes a man couldn't read. Eyes most men wouldn't want to read. His white duster flapped behind him as he broke into a gallop and rode closer, giving him the look, through the dust, of a bony wraith risen from some long-forgotten boot hill. "What you got in your craw, Brand?" Colter growled as he rode up alongside Jed. His duster collapsed like a sheet on a windlass clothesline. Half of a cheroot sprouted from his mouth, the end of it unlit. Colter never smoked them. He just chewed them into pulp and spat out the last chunk like a prune pit. "Ain't you going to bed this herd down, Colter, or are you aiming to run us all by moonlight?" "You just keep your pecker in your pants, Jed. They's a crick about 1 mile ahead, and it's got long grass on both sides. We ain't but another day's short ride from Abilene once we cross that little old crick." "You know, Silas," Brand said, "there just might be a heart beating in that scrawny chest of yours after all. I was beginning to give up all hope of ever stopping to rest." "Son, I guarantee them cattle will know when to stop long before you do. Once we hit that crick, they'll line up like children at a candy store window, and your day's work will be almost done." Jed laughed, despite his weariness and Colter's abrasive manner. The man was like a burr under the saddle blanket at times. Most of the time, Jed thought. There was just something not right about Colter, as if he were just a half-inch off a plum. Dan hadn't complained much because he was so easygoing, but Colter positively rubbed Jed the wrong way, always pushing to get the cattle up and moving early every morning, and holding them to the trail way